Thank you for joining me today for a quick demo of our no-code, low-code MIStudio product and integration with a chatbot through MCP. This is our MIStudio application. The top bar has all the components that I can use for building a screen here, and there are some hundreds of components that let you build quite beautiful screens. Today I'm just using some of the basic components just to get the idea across without being too visually distracting. The window on the top left lets us configure the components that we have on the screen. And our project panel is down here. Our project tree is down on the left here. As I say, I've already got part of this application built because otherwise you'd be watching me just drag and drop components for a while. I don't want to spend your time doing that. But I'm going to fill out some of the pieces that are missing. This display we see here will ultimately become an HTML5, a web display. That'll be shown up in a web browser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete this screen by adding in my diag counter here. And what you would do in many applications here is now you'd have to start writing code to make that do something useful. But in MIStudio, we can take that and we can say, okay, what I want to do is I want to move that to what we call our diagram window, where we can start building trees of logic. And here's my component. You see I already have some things on this display. I'm using simulators today. I could just as easily use any of the PLCs we have available or any of the other device connections. One of the areas we specialize in is electronics and semiconductor manufacturing, so we have support for those industries, including the sometimes difficult to use SexGen protocol. But now this is my display for my diag counter that I've dropped onto the screen here. I can easily drop a counter onto the screen. Let's call it diag counter. And then I can connect these two together. And we see immediately that that'll start updating on the screen. So here's it's just counting up every half second. Interesting, but much more interesting on this screen is actually building trees of logic. And one of the things that I really want to do here is I want to get that data into MQTT. And so to do that, the first thing I need to do is to configure a connection to an MQTT broker, so a UNS broker here. And we'll call that our UNS connection. And it needs an address of where the broker is located. There are expert properties that let you set a variety of things associated with that connection, but the basics should work for us today. So having created this connection, what I can do now is I can add the ability to publish this data that I've just created to the UNS. And so all I have to do that is I put a publish server on the screen. I give it the topic that I want to publish to, and I'm going to publish that to the mixed diag counter topic. And then I simply connect these together. So I'm going to connect the output of my diagnostic counter to my server there, and that will then immediately make that available to the UNS. As you see, I've done some other things here. The same basic pattern. So I have all these various UNS servers that. Oh, hang on. I need to connect that to my broker. So hang on. We connect that to my broker here. So I say, hey, I want to associate that particular UNS tag with that broker. I could, of course, have multiple brokers associated here. I could be connected to multiple UNSs at the same time, and it would simply be a matter of choosing which one from that list. Same thing. I need to connect these since I just dropped in a broker. So let's connect those to that broker. I have some more action going on down here because what I want to do here is I want to read something from the UNS. So here I have a component that rather than publishing it is subscribing to that UNS, and we'll set the UNS configuration for that. And that has the topic MES lot ID. That's going to populate that lot ID field on the top of the screen. And if I edit the value in that lot ID screen, it's going to also publish it to the UNS broker. And when at the same time as it reads it from the MQTT server, it's going to populate this variable within this application called lot ID. One more thing is I have a recipe here, so that's just going to look for a recipe. I don't know whether we'll get to that yet, but that's just going to use a recipe and put it in the other display on the screen. So now I have connectivity to my UNS. I have a number of values that are just simulators that are publishing to that UNS, and I have a few values that are reading from that UNS and also publishing to that UNS. And the significance is that it's this UNS broker. I could have multiple brokers. There's one more thing I want to do on the screen before we take the next steps, and that is I need some data for the MCP demo. And so what I want to do is I want to save these simulated values to the database, to a database. To save to a database, I have the same trick as the UNS. I have a database connection that's configured here. This is a SQL Server database. It's actually running on my local machine. But it could be configured anywhere. Pretty much any database anywhere can be configured within this application. So what I chose here is I chose to use a triggered historical component. The reason I chose that is for a number of reasons. The first thing, let's connect that to my database. I don't want to mess with the schema. I don't want to have to update the schema of my database. I don't want to have to do that manually. I don't want to have to create tables manually. And the triggered historical will do all that for us by simply setting this parameter to say, hey, I want the triggered historical to manage the database for me. So then all I need to do is provide a table name. And now anything I feed into this component will get stored in the table that I provided. The names of the components are significant, so if I hook in the diag counter into this input, I will end up with a column called diag counter. The same for gas flow. And for my part count here, and I have one that's called float flux server, which is the default name for just something that oscillates on the screen. So that's going to create that table. It's going to create it with those columns. The question is, when is it going to save that data? And it's triggered, so I can trigger that based on a time here. I have just a clock trigger here that's going to trigger. The clock trigger here is going to trigger every 10 seconds, so it'll save data every 10 seconds. The reason this connector is red, indicating there was an error, is that I'm in simulation mode. And so no data is being saved to the database. If I'd put PLCs in, I would not be communicating with the PLCs. That's just a safety factor to make sure that I'm not messing with things while I'm designing them here. But I can trigger based on anything, so that's a time-based trigger. But what I want is every time the lot ID changes, I absolutely want to see what happened to that lot ID. I want to see a record in that table that lot ID changed. Matching that, I need to get that data back somehow. So I'm going to put in a way to read that back. This is just a table lookup. And we'll call that our ProcessData. And that takes a SQL statement. And so I can enter into here a SQL statement. And I'm going to, just for simplicity, select everything from that table, wherever the lot ID matches the incoming lot ID. So now I can hook this up. You see we have the lot ID here that's going to be populated from our UNS. It's going to go into this little bit of logic here that says, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to set the value of this, essentially a latch. And then whenever you do that, I want you to trigger this read of data. I also have a button going in to trigger it because it's convenient to be able to test it doing that. So now I have connection to UNS. I have all my UNS data going, all the simulated data going into a database, and I have the ability to read back from that database. So as long as we're on databases, let's take a very quick diversion and build a new application that can show us that data. So we have a new screen called historical. Onto that screen, I'm going to put just a line chart. and I'm going to put a table. Now these look a little weird because they don't have any data feeding them. So we'll take those two and we'll move those to our diagram window. And what we want to do is we created the process data on our UNS values screen. So we want to pull that across so that we can use that data on this screen. And so we have a way to grab that. All I need to do here is I come in here and I manage connections. And I'm going to add an input to that connector that is the value of that process data from the database, the result of that query. And then I simply connect that to these two components, and when we have historical data, we'll see that historical data. One more thing is that you definitely need to be able to see what's going on here. So we have a UNS diagnostics screen here. And here I built the graphics, but what I want to do is quickly just complete the logic here. And that's just a matter, here's my graphic screens. What I want to do here is I want to read from my MQTT server. So again, I'm going to subscribe to the UNS connection that I created on my other screen. There's one trick here, which is I want to, normally on a component like this, you type the topic in because it's static. But here I want to be able to modify that topic dynamically. I want to be able to take it from a text field. And so I'm going to expose that property here and make that a connector into this component. So there we go. I have my topic field. I have my text field that I can populate that with. I want to put the output into my value text field here, but I want to put them in one at a time. So the first thing I'm going to do is clear that display every time I get a value, and then I'm going to update that display. And because I'm going to put in a wildcard topic, I want to know what topic I actually received data on. So that's my diagnostic screen. So we have a diagnostic screen, we have our UNS data, we have an historical screen. The one thing that remains that I promised here is we said we would add the MCP component to this. So all I have to do that is I say, hey, I've got my MCP component here. I'm going to add it onto the screen. There's essentially no configuration here. There is actually a port number because it's using HTTP, but the default works for me here. And so now all the various information, all the values within this application are now available through MCP and are available to my chatbot. And I can test that directly. I can test all that directly within the application. So not doing anything dangerous, we'll go from sim mode to live mode. And now we should start to see some of these lines clean up here. So we're actually saving data to the database. The lot ID doesn't have a value. Oh, it hasn't changed, so it hasn't triggered anything. So let's fix that problem. I have a MIStudio PubSub running here that I can change that lot ID, and that should update that value for us. And so that line goes green. And so when you have a new lot ID of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I should show you what I did there. That was just I'm just using the MIStudio. It's a MIStudio broker, and I'm just using MIStudio PubSub to just change that MES lot ID to be some new value, in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there we go. If we click on it again, we should see the new lot ID. So we're reading that directly from the UNS lot ID. It's going into the lot ID value. It's triggering a database read. And when we do a read of this database, which is erroring out because I didn't feed my lot ID into my database, I don't think. Let's test that. One of the beauties of a button is I can go into test mode here, and I can see my screen as it would look in a browser, and I can run my query against that. There we go. So when I reconnected this lot ID, I'd missed this lot ID as an input into my triggered historical. As soon as I connected that, the next time it saved a value, it updated the schema of the table to include that lot ID. And so now my SQL query, which uses the lot ID as a where clause, worked correctly. So that's a little dynamic schema update that I didn't intend to demonstrate, but there we go. Now if I look at my historical screen, I have data on my historical screen. I have my table is updated, my chart, which is really tedious, has updated, but hey, this is it's a demo. You're supposed to put real values in here, not just run random values out of a database. But anyway, so there we go. We have that. But that's not really what we promised here. So we have the whole application. We haven't checked our diagnostics, so let's just take a quick look at the diagnostics we have here. We can enter any topic into the topic field here, and so will give us the latest lot ID, and it works for anything. You saw there that I had the wildcard value in there. It was just updating really fast. So that just gives us the ability to look at what's going on here. Oh, the lot ID. I said I'd put the current. I promised to put the current lot ID on the screen here. So here we go. Let's do that. And so this is just the same trick of I want to pull that lot ID from the lot ID that we have configured here already in our UNS. So there we go. And that gives me the current lot ID on that screen. So hey, it's useful diagnostics. Okay, but that's not what we came here for. What we came here for was the integration with the chatbot. And so here you see I've started some integration with the chatbot. Let's have it retry that query and see what the current lot ID is. Tends to be a little chatty. It is a chatbot. And there we get the current value, and we get when it last changed as well. I mean, really now, the data is all available to the chatbot. So really, it's just a matter of how good is your imagination in creating prompts. And I feel these are kind of boss level prompts where I can ask for simple stuff, where I can get the historical data that I have, and I can just get that displayed in a quick table on the display. It'll also show it in HTML, and you can do anything you like with it. It is just that's just limited. The whole vibe coding thing is just limited by your imagination. It'll create HTML pages for you. I haven't tried it, but supposedly the Claude desktop will also create things like Excel files for you. And of course, I can set values. So I can change those values. And so I really have full control of the screen from here, whether that's necessarily a good idea. And obviously, we do have the ability to control whether you can write those values or not, but we can export them as read-only. Here I've just exported everything as a read-write. And so now we see that the lot ID has changed from lot 77 to new lot 2, and if we go back up here and we ask for the data again, we'll see data for the new lot 2 instead of for lot 77. What's nice about the chatbot, it often gives you information you didn't ask for, so that you get the ranges of all this information. But I could do other things too. I could ask it to check if the range is within a certain range, and then make some change on the display. So that's the core of this. This now is you have full integration. You have full access to every component that's on the screen. I'm referencing these obviously by name, so that I have these components that are on the screen that I can reference directly. The process data, as you recall, was the one we hooked up to our table on the historical screen. And so I'm just seeing that same thing in the chatbot, but I could say, hey, give me the values where it's greater than this, and make this analysis on this table, look at another value. And one important thing is it's actually smart enough to get the quality and the timestamp data. Which just kind of completes the MCP integration. I feel that data is never complete if you just have a value. You actually need to know more about it. You actually need to know that when it was updated, you need to know whether it's good quality data. And this is strictly when it was updated. This is not the time that this data was requested. This is the time this data was actually updated, and it tells us that it has good quality because that was provided as part of the MCP server. Thanks for listening. A couple of bonus features since you've got this far. I want to deploy this application. Clearly, I've been testing this within the development environment. Within that development environment, we have what we call targets. And we have a number of targets. Probably the most popular are edge-based targets, which is what I have here. I'm going to deploy it to my local system. But we also have the ability to deploy it with one click to AWS and to a number of other systems. So it's just a matter of saying, hey, I'm configuring where I want this to land. I want this to land on my local system, and I've got some security associated with that. I want to make this look good when I've got it up there. I want to be able to look at it on phones and tablets and whatever else. So what I really want is I want this to be a responsive application when I finish with it. And so I have a fairly basic editor here, but it'll achieve most of what I want to achieve. That'll let me put the applications where I want them to be. So let's start out with the UNS values application, and that will take the whole of the top of the screen. I could then, for instance, I could take this and I could say, okay, what I want to do is I want to put these two together on one piece of the screen. So then what my web page will look like is it'll show it to me like this. Let's go with that. It's not a very intelligent design, but it'll work for what I need. So we say, okay, that's the design we want, and this will be completely responsive when we're finished with it. It's a Bootstrap layout. It's using Bootstrap as the back end, but it's making it simple for you to build an easy layout. So I've got my layout. We'll say, okay. I go to Mix. I say I want to deploy it to my target. And it'll start building up the application. Especially on my VirtualBox, which is what I'm running here. This takes a minute or so. And so we'll come back when it's completed. All right, so finished building and finished deploying. We have a small application server running. If you wonder why Mix keeps showing up as a name, we have a small application server that's called Mix that runs these back-end applications. It has a web browser and it has an application server. So what's happened is the front ends here have been converted to HTML5 and will show up in the web browser. The back-end views have all been converted to components that will run 24/7 in an application server. And so what it's now offering me to do, that's all started up, that's all running. It's now offering to take me to the application I built. So let's just go browse to target and see what we get. And here we have it. Here we have our values coming in from the Mix server. And I did promise this is a responsive display, so you could look at this on your phone, you could look at this on a tablet, you can look at this anywhere. It's a high quality display, and this is the default deployment. Obviously, this is HTML. You could change the HTML to deploy anything you wanted to, but this is the default, and so I just have a menu down the side that corresponds to the applications I configured in my application and just shows those up in the web browser. So the final bonus feature is keeping the human in the loop. What I want to do here is have the chatbot give some indication to the human that something is going wrong. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to create a pop-up. So here we have within MIStudio the ability to create components. And let's set that to some height. And this is, I can build this just the same as I can build any other application. I could put values on here. I can do anything I like, but let's just put a label on it. Let's just put an indicator that we have a problem. And I'm not a fan of colors, but just because I can, we'll just make this background color. I mean, the whole goal of things like high-performance HMIs is to get out of the idea of using colors, because some people have trouble seeing them and because they're inconsistent across applications. I don't think you see many salmon pink usages in applications, but now I've got my pop-up. I can do a lot of things with components here. I can actually drop this directly on the screen. So what I could do here is I could make a complete template for something I want to do. I could make a representation, say, of a motor, and then I could just replicate that across 1,000 motors on my screen, whatever I need to do. But here, let's just do some simple things with it. The most obvious thing to do is to use that as a pop-up. And so I can come in here and say, okay, what I want to do, oops, hang on, I have to configure it first. What I want to do is I want to pop up, I want that process warning to pop up when I double click on this recipe box. And so I do that, and then sure enough, I get the check temperature warning when I double click on the recipe box. Not particularly useful. I can get cleverer than that. And so to get cleverer than that, what I can do is on my graphic screen here, I can put what we call a pop-up initializer. And same trick with that. I can say I want that to pop up my process warning. But now I can control this from the logic. I can control when that pop-up fires from the logic. So here's my pop-up launcher. And we're going to launch it when process warning changes, and in this case, whenever it changes. I think it has to change from 0 to 1. Let's just do one thing here. Set the click count to 1. It seems to be required. And so now whenever this process warning changes, I'm going to see my pop-up launcher launch that pop-up. So I mean, obviously I can do that from here. Let's do that. I can put a button on the screen and say, okay, I want to get my pop-up to pop up. Kind of boring, but here we go. Here's my button. I connect it up. I connect it up. I mean, I'm using a button, but it could just be a register from a PLC. It could be just about anything that's doing this pop-up. I mean, it's just anything that can generate an output can generate this pop-up. And so now I come in here and I press this. And I get my pop-up. I don't know why I had to click it a couple of times there, but I get my pop-up. All right, but now the other thing is, since I said anything can pop that up, let's ask Claude to do it. So we have to go live again. Where's my chatbot? Here is Claude. So in my boss mode here, what I've done is it's already won. I've made some intelligent decisions in Claude. Let's do it again. I've made some intelligent decisions using Claude, and when Claude changes that value to 1, we should see that value pop up on the screen. There we go. See, so from Claude, you use Claude to use your AI to do something intelligent to decide what's going on, and then you have the human in the loop aspect where you can get the human to get a notification that something's happening in the process and needs to be checked. You could, of course, automatically do something. You could stop the process, but I'm not sure I trust the chatbots and AI well enough to actually do that. I mean, clearly, if I'm willing to check this, then yes. If I've made my decision and said, yes, I need to stop it, then as a human, I could say, yes, stop the process. But I don't really, I wouldn't trust the chatbots yet to do that perfectly first time. So there we go. That's the bonus feature, the human in the loop. Let's pop up a display for the human to see what's going on.